What's up, everybody? Welcome back and happy October. Thanks for joining me for day 3 of 31 days of Halloween. And for day 3, I watched Dead Ringers. So Dead Ringers is a story about twin gynecologists who take full advantage of the fact that nobody can tell them apart until their relationship begins to deteriorate over a woman. Dead Ringers is a David Cronenberg film, and I'm not the hugest David Cronenberg fan. I want to be, and I'm trying to be, so that's why I'm trying to get through more of his films, but I'm not outright a huge fan of his. Going into this, I didn't really know what to expect. I've only seen a few of his movies. A History of Violence I really enjoyed. The Fly. I tried to watch Scanners. I fell asleep, not because it was necessarily bad, but I fell asleep, so I haven't finished that. I went in not knowing exactly what to expect, but I did overall end up enjoying this film. It's definitely more of a bleak, dark, depressing story about two brothers than it is like an outright horror film. Definitely has horror elements in it. David Cronenberg is always on the edge with a lot of his movies anyway. Let's get right into the positives for Dead Ringers, and the first one right off the bat is the performance from Jeremy Irons, which is absolutely fantastic. He absolutely carries this film. He plays both of the twin brothers, so the movie is really riding on him to portray both of these characters individually, and he does such a good job at giving them both distinct traits with like body movement, the way they walk, the stare, the way they even speak a little bit differently. One speaks a little more proper, the one speaks a little more quiet, hesitant, reserved. The hairstyling is a little bit different between each brother, noticeable enough that they look different, but simple enough so that later in the film, when you're supposed to start getting the brothers mixed up a little bit, it's easy enough to get them mixed up with their distinguishing features, even in place. So I watched some behind the scenes stuff of Dead Ringers. I heard that Jeremy Irons had intentionally stood on a different foot for each portrayal of the brother so that he could give them a different shift in the body movement, different shift in body weight, and really help to distinguish them apart. And I absolutely think it makes a huge difference. You can tell, even though the film does try to make you forget which brother's which, and they sort of blur together later in the film, you still can tell just by their motions and the way they walk how they're different and how each individual brother is distinct. And it's so crazy. It's just, he did such a phenomenal job in this film, and the performance is very understated in ways, and that's where it's so impressive too, how this sort of understated performance from both brothers can be so distinct and feel so different. Really, really great performance from him. The other positive is just the overall story of this film. I do think it's a really good story about two brothers and the way, the sort of interesting relationship that they have. It is based on a true story, and it takes some creative license also. I do think the stuff that they add does benefit the film. It takes it in a slightly different direction that I appreciate. And the story is just two brothers, their unhealthy relationship with each other, and how one sort of descends into this different mindset and the other follows, and they're really reliant on each other. They really hinge on each other's well-being to succeed. The two brothers go through life doing really inappropriate things to women and their patients, and getting away with really inappropriate things, very illegal things, but their relationship that they have is like all of the realism that they need in their world, at least until the girl comes into the relationship. But the fact that they are okay with what they're doing sort of makes it seem like it's okay in the world, and that just that unhealthy relationship in the way that they rely on each other to keep their sanity is a very interesting story. And then how once a girl comes into play, and once one starts to really unravel, the other unravels with him, not necessarily because he's going on a ride with him, but because of that connection that they have. When one falters, the other does. I think that it's really interesting that it's based off a true story of real brothers who had a very interesting relationship where they lived together, and, well, I don't want to spoil the end of the movie, but where this really happened to them. And then I think the way that they portray the descent of both of these brothers once they start to unravel and drugs come into play, and how they really rely on each other and how they're so connected. I think that they do a really good job of just showing this bleak descent into drug addiction, feeling of disconnection from the world and reality. And I think they portray that really well, how you can just be so disconnected from reality, and they have this unhealthy relationship, and then how drugs on top of that can really make everything spiral out of control more. And it's very bleak and it's dark. It's David Cronenberg, and you're left feeling with this sort of unease. And I mean, that's what you're supposed to get out of the movie, and I think it does a good job with it. The other thing is the look of the characters as I sort of already mentioned, as they sort of spiral out of control and they get even more disconnected with reality, their wardrobes start to change, and their wardrobe actually starts to, I think, overlap and connect. I heard that Jeremy Irons apparently took both of the wardrobes for both brothers and put them together because he wanted them to be indistinguishable, especially towards the latter part of the film when you're supposed to be kind of confused and their worlds are sort of colliding and twisting together. And I think that the way that they physically show the characters, their makeup and hair and the mess around their world and their apartment is really well done to visually show how their worlds are sort of colliding and also spiraling out of control. And the final positive is the ending of the film. While bleak and based on reality, does take creative license, and I liked what they did with it. David Cronenberg adds a little bit on the top, body horror. So on to my negatives for Dead Ringers, and the first is probably controversial, but I think the film is kind of boringly shot. It's intentionally done. I don't think it's poorly shot. It's just David Cronenberg's style, and especially with this film, is not like my favorite to look at. It's not the most interesting to look at. It's the sets feel very like American Psycho, like apartment buildings, sort of, I don't know, rich level apartment buildings and then hospitals. It just feels sort of bland and bare, and I think it's supposed to feel cold and generic like that, but it just does make it for a little bit of a boring watch. I don't think everything's shot super uniquely or anything. Again, not poorly done. It's not really my cup of tea. It's not my favorite stylistically to watch. And then on top of that, because of the style of the movie, the way it unfolds and the way it's shot, it is a slow film. It takes its time. It's got a slow pace that you have to get through. And adding to that is my final negative, which is the character of the girlfriend who splits up the relationship between the brothers. I don't really like her. I think she's kind of annoying, and it's not necessarily the actress' fault. I think she's supposed to be a little bit manic, but she's a little bit annoying to watch when she's on screen, and it does make me feel like I don't want to continue watching this story between them, especially between both brothers and her. And when you don't really care about what's going on, it makes for a less interesting watch. But overall, I did enjoy Dead Ringers. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and yeah, it's a David Cronenberg film. I enjoyed it. It's dark, it's bleak, it's slow. If you like his style, I feel like you would like it. It's pretty highly rated on IMDb. I think a lot of people like it. I think I'm feeling like maybe his films are just not my favorite films. I love The Fly. I really enjoyed History of Violence, but I don't know. I just think his style maybe is not my favorite. I need to watch more Cronenberg. It's a shame I haven't watched enough of him. So great film. I do think it's really well made. It's good. It's just maybe not my personal favorite that I would go back to anytime soon. So thank you for watching. If you got to the end, I really appreciate it. And thank you for joining me for day 3 of 31 days of Halloween.